Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. We still have a few people that will be joining us, but we're going to get going in the interest of everyone's time and being respectful of that. So as with everything we've experienced in the last 18 months, the minute I start this webinar, my dog starts barking. So we'll just, as I told Jane earlier, this is being recorded, so we'll just keep that in the archives to remind us of what a fun year and a half we've had. So thank you for being here. And on behalf of the Housing Bureau for Seniors, I'd like to welcome you to the Senior Living Week and today's workshop. I'm Janet Hunko, and I work with a great team at the Housing Bureau for Seniors. The purpose of our annual Senior Living Week event is to bring together the people who provide senior services, resources, and products with those who need them. We are grateful to the many sponsors who have contributed funding to our Senior Living Week, which allows us to offer this event to you at no charge. A special thanks to our event sponsor, Bassett Murray Law Group, PLLC, as well as our grab and go sponsors, Cambrian Memory Care and Assisted Living, Story Point Senior Living, Silver Maples of Chelsea Retirement Neighborhood, Brookhaven Manor Senior Living, and Senior Helpers. Housing Bureau for Seniors is a community-anchored program of community health services at Michigan Medicine. We rely on supporters like you who can to help us contribute with these valuable programming. Finally, we value your feedback. We'll be sending out a survey on October 1st. Please keep an eye out for that in your email box, and please let us know what you think of our this year's events. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We have before you Jane Bassett and Amanda Murray. Jane has practiced in the field of elder law, probate, estate planning, and LGBT law since 1994. She's a frequent contributor to the educational programming of the Institute for Continuing Legal Education and numerous community organizations. She's an accredited VA attorney and a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. She is a graduate of Albion College and Eastern Michigan University of Detroit Mercy Law School. Amanda Murray graduated cum laude from Eastern Michigan University with a bachelor's degree in business administration. She went on to pursue her legal career at Western Michigan University Thomas M. Cooley Law School, where she graduated in 2012 in the top 10% of her class with a Juris Doctorate, concentrating in litigation. Amanda is a member and actively involved in the elder law and disability rights section of the State Bar of Michigan. She's a member of the Washtenaw County Bar Association, the probate estate planning section of State Bar of Michigan, and the children's law section of the State Bar of Michigan. Amanda has been a speaker at the Elder Law Disability Rights Conference on the Defense of Marriage Act and has been a presenter throughout the community on estate planning. She co-authored, quote, Representing the Elder or Disabled Same-Sex Spouse, an article published in Res Ispa Loquitur. I hope I said that right. You guys are in for a treat. They're going to give us a bunch of good information. The topic of today's discussion, when I'm 64, make that 84, considerations as we age. Couple housekeeping bits. This is a webinar, so we're going to be looking at the Q&A if you have questions. There's a Q&A button in your control panel. If you could type your questions there, we're going to reserve time at the end to answer them. Chats, unfortunately, are going to be ignored right now because it's a little it's too difficult to look at chats and look at Q&A at the same time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jane and Amanda, and I'm going to take myself off the screen. Thank you.
Good morning, Janet. Thank you for such a warm welcome for both Jane and myself. So I'd like to just go over what Jane and I will be talking with everyone about today, and then we'll hop right into it. We're going to be talking a little bit about some estate planning documents that we think is helpful for everyone to have. We're going to go into some discussion about Medicare, Medicaid, that kind of coverage. Then we're going to talk about downsizing or transitioning to a different living environment or aging in place, paying for assisted living or long-term care, and then just kind of some tips and what to watch out for. Anything to add, Jane?
No, just thank you for having us, and we're really glad to be here today.
Yes, we are. So the first thing that we want to talk about is estate planning documents. And, you know, you may have some in place already. You may know a lot, you may know nothing. So I like to view this kind of as an estate planning 101. And I think one of the biggest common things that we hear as elder law attorneys is we don't have an estate to plan for, or you know, and I'm not sick, so I don't need to worry about a power of attorney for medical or my estate planning documents. So I'm here to say that if you are alive, you have an estate to plan for because you are part of your estate. So just a brief overview of some documents that Jane and I both support having, no matter your age, 64, 84, 95. The first is a power of attorney for finances. This is what I think is the easiest to explain, is nominating someone to step into your shoes financially. So this document governs during someone's lifetime, and it nominates an individual to transact business on your behalf. So whatever you can do financially, this person that you nominate could do financially. So they could open a bank account, they can access your bank account, sell your property, access your IRAs. And one common thing I also hear in regard to this is that I'm married or I have joint accounts. So I think that that's covered. And if you have income or you need to apply for benefits, even if you have joint accounts, that joint account holder or your spouse is not automatically authorized to do those types of things. So it is beneficial for everyone to have a power of attorney for finances. The second document that is beneficial is a power of attorney for medical. Sometimes this can be known as a patient advocate designation. I think some area hospitals refer to this as advanced directives with a patient advocate designation inside of it. You might have seen it as your last 5 wishes. It is a healthcare durable power of attorney for medical. And this nominates a person to step into your shoes and make medical decisions if the doctor says that you're not competent to make your own medical decisions. Our specific document requires 2 doctors to reach that conclusion. The reason it's important to have a power of attorney for medical is because if you ever come across, if you're ever in a situation in which you cannot make your own medical decisions, if you do not have a power of attorney for medical in place, if you don't have a patient advocate designation, then there is no one legally authorized to make medical decisions for you. So if you didn't have that document, the court would need to get involved and appoint somebody called a guardian. So right now, you're in the driver's seat of being able to name who that person would be should something occur and you need a patient advocate to make medical decisions for you. I am biased, of course, but I do believe that you benefit from counsel when thinking about a power of attorney for medical, and you're able to communicate and craft that document to your needs versus, doing it by yourself. So Our document lays out the authority of the power that you want your patient advocate to have when making medical decisions about you. We're a big believer here in having a tough conversation with your patient advocate. Nobody likes to talk about end of life decisions, but they're so important to express how you feel about getting medical treatment, what type of medical treatment you would want, and what type of medical treatment are your absolute, I would never want that. So when making these documents, it's very important to have that conversation. So your patient advocate, should they ever have to make decisions for you, they would have a good guide on what type of decisions you would make for yourself if you were able to make them. So it's important to note here that the power of attorney for finances and the power of attorney for medical are documents that assist someone during their lifetime. So if the person passes away, I like to think of it as the document passes with the person. So the power of attorney for medical is no longer valid. The power of attorney for finances is no longer valid. Recently, our state, a few years ago, I guess it's not that recent anymore. I feel like we lose a year plus because of COVID. So it's not too recent, but our state did enact something called a funeral representative law. So now you can designate someone to be in charge of your funeral and where it is, whether someone is cremated or buried, what happens to that person. So if you do not designate a funeral representative, our law does say that your next of kin gets to make those types of decisions. Another document that we support having is a will. And this, of course, is a document that distributes someone's tangible personal property, so the contents of their house, distributes those items, as well as anything that goes through the probate court. So anything that is not jointly owned or does not have a beneficiary listed on the asset. So if it's an account, it doesn't have a beneficiary on it, and it's only in that person's name. So it's in an individual name and that person passes away. That is what needs to go through the probate process. So your will would govern that. Inside of your will, you designate something called a personal representative. That person is responsible for carrying out the terms of your will. And I'd like to talk a little bit about probate and things that stay outside of probate, the probate court. If you have a joint account, so me and my husband own an account together, I'll pick on him. My husband passes, I own the whole account now. Now that's by something called operation of law. So if it's jointly held and one account holder passes away, the other account holder owns the whole. So even if my husband's will gave everyone everything he had to his son, to our son, that joint account would not be part of that because it was jointly held with me. So his will would not come into play. That's the way joint ownership works. The same applies to the house. If a house is jointly held, if one owner passes, then the other one owns the whole. Another way to pass assets is through something called beneficiary designation. So if I just own my own account and I had my husband on and I passed away, then the account would automatically go to him. Now, Michigan is unique in that we are able to do that on our deeds as well. So any real property, any land with a deed, we can name a beneficiary directly on it. So that does not go through the probate process. So if the landowner or the property owner passes, it goes directly to that beneficiary or beneficiaries listed on the deed. That's, you may have heard this before, it's commonly known as a ladybird deed. The other thing I'd like to briefly touch upon is trusts. So there are a number of reasons why someone would contemplate having a trust in their estate plan. So trust, instead of going through the probate process, trust, I like to think of it as a suitcase. The trust is the suitcase. You have to fill the trust with assets, and then the trust document tells what happens to the assets. So the trust document can hold assets over a period of time and distribute items to beneficiaries as the decedent wanted. So there are a number of, that's a very rudimentary explanation of a trust. We could talk about a trust for a whole hour. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but just for general purposes, a trust does not, it avoids the probate process, and it can hold assets for a period of time and distribute them according to the terms of the trust that was set up. There are a number of reasons to do trusts. One of them could be if you had a property that you would want to preserve for your family, for tax reasons. If you had a disabled child, a disabled adult child, or a minor who is disabled that you wanted to leave funds to. If you had minor children you wanted to leave funds to, just to name a few. Jade, anything to add to that?
Just that I hear very often that people want to come in to do a will because they don't want to have to go to probate. And I just want to stress that having a will does not avoid probate. It's just instructions to the judge about what you want done with those assets that have to go through probate. Avoiding probate includes things like beneficiary designation, joint ownership, and having things in a trust.
Great, that's a great reminder. And somebody once, another attorney once posed a will this way to me, and it always sat with me. A will actually anticipates the probate process. And so it's very surprising to a lot of people when you present it that way.
Okay, we've got some questions, but we're going to hold those till the end. So just know that we see them and we will get back to you on those. So let's move on to the Medicare and Medicaid issues here. So just a distinction, Medicare is that program that provides health care for people who are over 65 and over, and people who have a disability and are receiving Social Security disability. That Medicare kicks in 2 years after the disability is documented with the Social Security Administration. So that's more of a given. That doesn't necessarily, it's not based on the needs, the financial needs of the person. Medicaid, on the other hand, is based on financial need. So that would cover, well, it covers a lot of things, actually. I believe at some point in the past, someone in the know told me there were 64 different Medicaid programs in Michigan. So you have to make sure when you're talking about Medicaid that you're talking about the same program as the other person. Most people who are facing long-term care or some kind of an aging type of medical condition are referring to long-term care Medicaid. It's referred to in the Medicaid policy manual as the L/H program, standing for long-term care and hospitalization. But it's a much broader program now. So the Medicaid for long-term care will cover not only in a skilled nursing facility, but in some situations, it will cover people's care when they are in still living at home for the community and home-based waiver program, or the PACE program, which is a day, more of a day program where people go to the PACE center, receive their care there, and then come back home. This assumes, of course, that they've got either enough physical ability and cognitive ability to be able to be safe at home for those times that they're not at the PACE program, or that they have somebody that they live with that provides for that care while they're at home. So it's kind of a partnership program. Both the waiver program and PACE are kind of a partnership program with the natural resources that a person might have to help cover those time periods when either the agency or PACE are not providing care. For those two programs, there's a pretty stringent financial eligibility, however. So the person must have less, their income, gross income per month must be less than about $2,300 a month in order to qualify. If the income is higher than that, even if it's 1 penny over the threshold, the person won't be eligible for those programs. Now, it is possible to private pay for those programs, but Medicaid would not kick in at that point. So there's always an income eligibility rule, and there's an asset eligibility rule. So the asset eligibility rule is that the person has to have less than $2,000 in countable resources in order to qualify for the program. That holds true for both in a nursing home, the waiver program, and the PACE program. So in those programs, you have to have 2,000 or less as a single individual in order to qualify. As a married couple, there's some different rules. Usually the community spouse can keep about 1/2 of the accountable assets, up to a maximum of about $130,000 and some change. So it's 139.33, I think, is this year's limit. So with that, of course, the countable resources could be, it could be quite substantial, and the community spouse gets to keep 1/2 of those up to the $130,000 mark. So with that, oftentimes we see some planning techniques to be able to help Medicaid kick in. And I think we're going to talk about those a little bit further down the line. So I'm going to reserve that and just give you that little bit of a teaser that there are ways that we can recharacterize things and help Medicaid kick in quicker. The other programs that are available through Medicaid, of course, are the Affordable Care Act Medicaid. There are certain programs for people with specific disabilities or specific medical conditions. Quite a few of those cover children with special conditions. There are programs that are ancillary to Medicaid. So in other words, you have to have Medicaid in order to get into these other programs. And that would be the home health program. There's money for incontinence supplies. They cover some travel time for medical appointments or travel expenses for medical appointments. Did I mention the home health program? So that's a program that allows people to be able to get a monthly check from the state that they then can turn around and use that to pay for healthcare in the home. So there's a whole bunch of these little programs that we can, once we get the person on Medicaid, we can patch together to make sure that the person gets what they need and to be able to save some of those budget dollars for other things that are important for the person. I'm going to flip back to Medicare for just a second, and then I'm going to hand it back to Amanda. So with Medicare, there are different programs under Medicare. There's, of course, the traditional Part A and Part B. One covers doctor's visits and the other covers long-term care only for rehab purposes up to 100 days. But there's also Part D that covers prescription coverage. There's also Medicare C, also known as the Medicare Advantage programs. So these are programs where private insurance carriers will contract with the federal government and use the Medicare premium dollars that you would normally pay for Part A and Part B to put you into a private insurance policy. Now you've got to be careful because some of those, you've got to read the fine print. It's a buyer beware thing. It doesn't cover exactly what traditional Medicaid covers, but sometimes it gives you better coverage for the things that you might need. Sometimes it's not so great coverage for the things that you need. So you have to be careful when you're contracting with those Medicare C or Medicare Advantage programs that you know what it is you need as much as we can anticipate it, and understand what the policy will cover for you under those circumstances. There are agents out there who will go through these programs with you and help you determine what the best program is for you. Amanda and I do that for people sometimes as well. Oftentimes those Medicare C programs do not automatically include prescription coverage, so you may have to add on the D anyway. So you've got then the premium for the what would normally cover A and B coverage, but you still have the D premium to cover the prescription costs. Some of those programs will cover things like vision insurance, where your traditional Medicare won't. So like I say, there are some times when those are going to be better coverage for you, again, depending on what you need. I will stress that at 95, or at 95, at 65, yeah, I'm hedging this because I'm approaching that mark. So I want that further. But at 65, you have to make sure that you have signed up for Medicare B. If you don't, and you decide you want to sign up later, it's going to cost you more in premiums. So make sure that you're looking at this as you approach 65 and make a conscious decision to get signed up for it. If you have healthcare coverage still from your employer, you can continue with that and delay getting your Medicare coverage, but it's really best, and most employers require that you get on the full Medicare plan as soon as you can, and then you can drop back your employer coverage if that looked to be a good thing to do. You also are going to want to take a look at that point at Medigap coverage. So these are, again, they're private carriers. They have to follow certain federal guidelines in providing these plans, but they are private carriers that pay for the gap. So your Medicare premium, or I'm sorry, your Medicare deductible and your Medicare copays is what they would cover. A lot of times the employer policy and Medicare cover the same thing, and then nobody ends up covering those 20% copays or the deductible. The Medigap is specifically designed to cover those things that are above and beyond what Medicare pays for. So you're going to want to look at all of those different factors to figure out what's going to work best for you. Okay.
Yes, and you know, there's a lot of information out there, and it can take a lot of time to wrap your head around all of the programs. So it's a good idea to start looking, you know, not in the month of your 65th birthday, but perhaps planning on maybe on the eve of the year that you're turning 65 to kind of just start taking a look around at some of those things. So it's tailored to what your needs are, what your plan is. And when I say what your plan is, I mean to start thinking about what you want in your next stage of life. And I like to explain it in regards to your home life. So
I'm going to interrupt. I just had one more thought. It was a great segue, but let me put this in.
Okay.
Is that some employers automatically transfer you off from your healthcare insurance and onto a Medicare C program because they want you off from their roster. So please be aware of this. If you get any communication that you are being automatically transferred, you have the right to opt out of that. But if you don't do it within a certain amount of time, you're going to be locked in. The big one that ends up doing this is the state of Michigan. If you're a state of Michigan retiree, watch for this because they do it every time.
Yeah, that's very important to know. So I'd like to talk about what we encourage people to start thinking about as they age. And so I'd like to start with this term aging in place, right? So what is aging in place and what does that mean? And aging in place is the ability of someone to remain in their home, in their own home, and live in their community safely and independently and comfortably, regardless of their age or their ability or their income. So, so that's the technical definition of that. But when people age, you should start to think about, hey, do I live in a 2-story home? Do I want to remain in this home? Do I need a 2,500 square foot home? Or should I be downsizing? And so if your idea is to live in your home as long as you possibly can, that's great. And perhaps that's your goal, and that's aging in place at your home. So to think about if you need to revamp your home, if there needs to be improvements to be able to stay there long term, and if that's really what you want, and then do you have the means to pay for people to come in the home, or what do you need help with? And sometimes it's not just about what someone needs, but they need help with. Sometimes it's about just taking it off someone's plate. So, if you don't like paying bills, having a bill pay service, or if you've reached a point in your life that you would rather go to the movies than to clean your house, then about having someone come into your home and offer that type of support. Because it's about enhancing the quality of your life if you're able to do that versus sometimes what you need. Sometimes it's not just about care. So that is one possible option for an individual, is to remain in their home and try to age in place in their home, and be connected to resources if they need the resources. But another important thing to keep in mind is to explore downsizing if you need to downsize, and perhaps putting some of money away for if you have money from downsizing. Another option to consider is going to look at assisted living homes or assisted living communities. Now, there are a ton of assisted living communities out there, and they look very different. So there's a very large continuum of care in an assisted living. So you could live in an independent apartment, have no assistance whatsoever, and it's still considered assisted living if there's meals provided, or sometimes there's services a la carte. Sometimes in that same type of setting, there could be home health care that comes in, and it's typically a smaller living environment that provides some sort of added benefit. Cooking, to me, is the biggest added benefit if someone doesn't need any other assistance. Transitioning to an assisted living facility or assisted living campus or assisted living building, whatever whatever type environment that you're looking at or considering, the meal provided is a big deal. Also, I cannot stress this enough, community activities. So a lot of people that Jane and I meet do want to stay in their own home, and they do want services in their own home. A big thing that's missing, even if their medical needs can be met, even if there's not medical needs yet, but there's some sort of barrier for that person to be in the community, say they don't drive anymore or something like that. There's still a very big social aspect that an assisted living brings that sometimes independent living does not bring. So a lot of places organize community events. You feel a sense of community, all the while not having to make your breakfast and not worrying about what you're having for dinner, just choosing from a menu. And there's something to be said for that. And then at the other end of the continuum of care, if somebody were to need skilled nursing, and that's a long-term care facility. And that's what most people in terms of a name think of as a nursing home. Okay, and this is the type of facility that someone needs skilled nursing. They have to have a lot of monitoring, or they have some sort of medical ailment that prevents them from being able to live in a very high supported assisted living situation, or prevents them from being able to live at home with supports in place. So one thing I can say is that you can have, we encourage everyone to take a look at those things, perhaps devise a plan on what you would want to happen for you, and communicate that plan to your family. But most importantly, have a backup plan. Because as I'm sure you all know, life does not go as expected sometimes. And so if you have a backup plan, you at least are prepared or have communicated to your family about what you would like to see happen for you should your primary plan not work out. And then Jane, how are we paying for all of this?
Well, there are a variety of ways to pay for this. Of course, there is private pay. Most assisted living facilities now run somewhere between $2,500 a month to about $9,000 a month, depending on the level of care that's needed, the care setting, whether it's memory care, or just simply an apartment with a pull cord and maybe some people. In a nursing home, those rates are running about $12,000 to $13,000 a month right now. So you can see it's pretty pricey to be able to do that. A lot of times we see, probably not as often as we'd like, but sometimes we see that people have long-term care insurance. And those policies will oftentimes, almost always pay in a nursing home setting. Most of them we see now will pay in an assisted care setting, although sometimes you have to meet certain requirements. And the vast majority of them do offer some part of the benefit that will be paid in a home care setting. So if you're having home aides come in to provide personal care, oftentimes the long-term care policies will cover that. For a while, we were having a great deal of difficulty getting these insurance companies to actually pay on the claims. They wanted to, throw up these roadblocks so that it was difficult to meet the requirements to make a claim. We're seeing that resolve a little bit now. They're not being quite so difficult, but we're seeing fewer long-term care policies because people had stopped purchasing them. There was a time period where employers were starting to offer them as a group policy. I know U of M offered them for a while. that kind of slacked off. So we're not seeing as many of them. But if you have one of those long-term care policies, our suggestion often is to hang on to it, even though they're increasing premiums pretty regularly. And, you know, a great percentage of the premium is going up. Still, they're oftentimes best to hang on to those rather than let them go. Another option for care is Medicare. So if a person has been in a hospital and they're being released from the hospital and they need rehabilitation, oftentimes they can go into a skilled nursing facility for up to 100 days and have Medicare pay for that care. I'm just gonna, before I forget this thought, I'm going to put it down because I want to make sure I talk about it. So with Medicare, they will pay for the skilled nursing stay, as I say, up to 90 days, but the person has to be able to benefit from the rehab. So if the person is not willing to participate in the rehab, sometimes we see situations where a person has been over-medicated, and because of the medication, they're too weak or too sleepy to participate in the Medicaid, or in the rehab rather. Then in those situations, that rehab could end early. So we routinely see about 23 days as a standard. Somewhere between 23 and 60 days is usually when they start saying, okay, we think that you've had enough rehab and we're going to discharge you. So discharge sometimes looks like going home and having, you know, continued physical therapy as an outpatient. Sometimes it means discharge to a to an assisted living facility where you can continue receiving the help that you need, but in a lesser setting than a skilled nursing facility. And sometimes it means moving across the hall to a different bed that is not Medicare certified, that is either private pay or Medicaid for long-term care. Veterans benefits are another thing that we always screen for. If the person who needs the care or a spouse of that person, even if it's an ex-spouse or a spouse that's been deceased for a long period of time, has been a veteran and served at least one day during what our Congress has designated as wartime, those are very specific dates, then we can sometimes get what's called aid and attendant benefits. And what that is a special pension through the Veterans Administration to help pay for people, for veterans or their spouses who are homebound and need care at home. They will pay up to about $2,500 a month for services in the home for the veteran, and a little bit less than that for a spouse. So about just short of $2,000 a month for a spouse. So oftentimes, if we have a situation where there's a veteran in the mix, we can request that benefit to start, apply for the benefit, and then that money will start coming in to help pay for home health aides to come in and help the person stay in their home longer. In order to do that, we need the assets to be, again, the countable assets, so not including the home, one vehicle, and a prepaid funeral contract, to be $132,000 or less. And again, we have some planning techniques to help get us to that point if need be. So if we've got somebody with $175,000 in assets, oftentimes we can help them recharacterize or move that money around so that they get the benefit of it, and yet they're able to apply for the veterans benefits and be able to help sustain their care at home. Once a person goes into a skilled nursing facility, if they have veterans benefits, the aid and attendant veterans benefits, that benefit will drop to $90 a month. So it's not something we generally help people pursue if it looks like they're going to have to go into a skilled nursing facility anyway.
I can just add really quickly.
Sure.
About recategorizing or recharacterizing, I'm sorry, recharacterizing funds, is that it is very, it's a common misconception that people tell individuals spend down to $2,000 or less and then apply for Medicaid. There are, this is not a plug for Jane and I. We just want to help you and we want to provide you with the information. Please don't wait until you spend down to $2,000 if you or a family member are in need of long-term care benefits, or even if you're applying for VA benefits, because there are things, that's what we don't want you to do. And people mean well, and everybody tries to help, but this is such a rapid changing area of law with so much misinformation out there that we would just encourage you to go see someone who is well, an attorney who is well versed in Medicaid and Medicaid laws or veterans benefits. So
okay. So I see we've got about 15 minutes, so we don't want to miss any information here for folks, and we want to get to your questions too. So Medicaid is one of those programs that we can help move monies around to recharacterize them and to help people get qualified. Oftentimes people come in and they say, oh, I don't want to hide assets. We don't hide anything. We tell the Department of Health and Human Services exactly what's been done. It's just that we know what the regulations are, and we know what's going to be considered countable and what's going to be considered exempt. So we use their own rules to help establish that countable asset column in a place where you're going to meet eligibility. So there are various things we could do. I'm just going to toss out some names here because we are running short on time, but we can do a Houdini trust where we put the house into a trust and we take it back out, and just the timing of that sometimes will help clear a lot of the assets. We can do solely for the benefit of trust for spouses, where we take that money and we put it under family members' management, and they give it back to the community spouse a little bit at a time. It's done in a very calculated way. We can do a half a loaf divestment where we're gifting away part of the money to family members. We're using the other part of the money to set up a short-term annuity contract that will help to structure that money that's coming in every month in a way that makes sense to cover the divestment penalty period. We don't suggest that people just give away money. Okay, it used to be that those gifts were somewhat disregarded. That's not the case anymore. So be aware, if you think you're within 5 years of needing to go into a skilled nursing facility and you want to take a look at doing Medicaid, those gifts that you make, and I'm not talking about holiday gifts or birthday gifts or donations to your church. I'm talking about the large gifts. Gifting your child $10,000 as a down payment on a house, pledging $10,000 to your university for their foundation fund. Those are great gifts to make, but if you're within 5 years of needing this, my suggestion is don't do it. Make it a gift at the end of your lifetime through your will or some other provision, but be very careful about that. If you end up with a diagnosis, or your spouse ends up with a diagnosis where it looks like you may be heading to needing greater care, whether that's dementia, Lou Gehrig's disease, cancer, multiple myeloma, any of those things where you think, oh, okay, this is a degenerative disease, this is likely going to need greater care for me in the future, that would be the time to come in and talk to us. But it's never too late. So if you end up going into the nursing home, or you have a trip to the ER that looks like it's going to lead to long-term care, get a hold of us. We can help you through that and do crisis planning at that point. Any good elder law attorney will be able to do that. It's not just Amanda and I, but that's what we do for people. the other program I want to mention is hospice care. So hospice is designed to be a program that is covering the last 6 months of life. A doctor would have to certify that you're likely within the last 6 months of your life. And if hospice does come into play, then they will cover things like your medications that you're on, incontinence supplies. They'll provide a bath nurse a couple of times a week. They'll provide a nurse that comes to your home so that you don't have to leave your home and struggle to get into the doctor's office. They will cover durable medical supplies that you need. So all of this is covered through Medicare if you're on a hospice program. I tell people, don't wait until you're within a month of passing or days of passing. Talk to your doctor about this earlier on. I think doctors on the whole are focused on curing, on making you better, on improving your health, and not so focused sometimes on making sure that you're comfortable for the end of your life. So I think it's up to patients to say to their doctors, I'm open to talking about this, and I'm relying on you to tell me when it's time to make that referral to hospice. Hospice can be in your own home, in your apartment, in assisted living, in the hospital, in a nursing home, anywhere you in a hospice residence, if if that's needed. So at any care setting, that's important to do. Palliative care is good for pre-hospice. So if you're not ready to go into hospice yet, but you need some help with maintaining pain control or medications that will help you, palliative care is delivered by hospice providers, and it's really a good add-on program. So do you want to take over for the other items, Amanda, or do you want me to go into that?
Sure. I mean, we both can. If you have anything specific you'd like to talk about.
I just mentioned scams. Scams are still a huge thing to watch out for. If you get a call that your grandson's in trouble somewhere, don't buy into it. Don't mention your grandson's name, because they're just going to pick up on that and feed it back to you and try to get some money from you. IRS, they're not going to call you and threaten to put you in jail. Social Security is not going to call you and ask you for your Social Security number. If they're calling you, they've already got your Social Security number. So just really beware of those.
And people, just to piggyback on Jane, people are very good that do this. Very good. Okay. We have seen people send thousands of dollars of overseas in hopes of getting a return on that. And right now, if we're just talking about it, it seems ridiculous. But these scammers have a way of entering into someone's life and getting trust and providing on some of their promises, so they hook somebody in. And so just be aware of that. They're good at their job. Somebody on the other, and somebody on the other end of the phone threatening you didn't pay your IRS bill and you have 10 days to pay it. The IRS is not calling you. If you owe them enough money, they'll knock on your door. Okay. Otherwise, they're sending correspondence to you. Okay. Just be aware. Even credit card, even people tend to pretend to be your credit card company, saying, "Hey, you missed a payment. Can you give us a payment over the phone today?" And so, before answering questions, before responding to any of that, do your homework. Don't respond on that day. Get a callback number or something if you think it's even remotely legitimate, and you can look into it yourself before providing any information over the phone.
Right. So
okay.
We've got about 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and answer these questions here. The first one is, can a power of attorney for finances be activated only if I'm incapacitated? The answer is yes, it can be presently effective, in which case you don't have to show disability, or it can be activated only upon a stated event like incapacity or a certain date coming up.
Okay. The next question is, I'm running into more older adults who are single, no children, and have no one to designate for medical or financial proxy. What are the realities as far as resources and supports in these situations? And this is where I do think the benefit of counsel will help those individuals to be able to connect with somebody who may be a good person to be your patient advocate, or maybe a good person to be your attorney in fact or financial power of attorney. So there are professionals that serve in this capacity. And there are sometimes entities that serve in this capacity. And sometimes you have to think outside of the box to really get somebody who you think may be a good fit. But know that there are people available that do this.
The next one is, what's the advantage of a trust over a will? So the trust avoids probate. So if you have no other way to avoid probate with the beneficiary designations, then the trust would be the way to go. It's also good if you have a very complex distribution plan. So if you have a lot of ifs, ands, and buts in the way that you want money distributed. So this money to this person, but only if they take my pet. Then if they don't, then this person gets it. Those types of things are better taken care of in a trust. And the big thing is if you have people who are receiving gifts from you, who for some reason should not have the money in their own hands. So if it's a minor, if it's somebody with an addiction or a health issue, someone who's on governmental benefits, so if they have a disability and they rely on Medicaid for their medical care and maybe SSI for their income, they can't receive those monies directly. It'll disrupt their programs. And so a special needs trust can be put into place for them. Or if you have a blended family, if you have children from a prior marriage and a current spouse and you want to make provisions for both of them, trusts are good ways to do that.
Okay, our next question is, does a trust of a personal representative or some person entity responsible for carrying it out after death? I'm going to try to answer this. The question I think it was is, so a personal representative is designated to carry out the will, and a trustee is designated to carry out the terms of a trust. And so there are specific people responsible for carrying it out. A will does occur after death, and a trust, the distributions would occur after the person passed away, the trust grantor passed away.
What did you take the next one, Amanda?
If I don't have anyone I want to designate as personal representative, power of attorney, or medical or financial, is there some entity that can be designated like an attorney or financial institution? The answer is yes. I covered that a little bit further up with a similar question, didn't have the personal representative, but there are people or professionals who will serve as a personal representative, as a trustee, as a power of attorney for medical, as a power of attorney for finances. Attorneys serve that. Jane and I, serve in those capacities. We know other attorneys that serve in those capacities. We can help connect people to those, someone who's a good fit in financial institutions. I don't think financial institutions do power of attorney for medical, but.
Does it mean that if I have designated beneficiary or joint ownership for everything I own, I don't need a will or trust? You don't need a trust, most likely. You may still need just a basic will. It depends on where you would want things to go. If there was something that you got at the end of your lifetime that you weren't able to collect, or if you had something like a medical malpractice claim or a claim against a negligent driver. In those situations, you're going to want someone to be able to carry out collection of those things. Usually that's the personal representative under a will. But if you don't have a will, the laws of Michigan state who would stand in those places. So to be your personal representative and to receive assets that go into the estate. It's normally your next of kin.
The next question is, how can we leave our summer house to our children? I think that that's easy if you trust your children to be able to get along and navigate what happens to that. It's through something called a ladybird deed. It's a special type of deed we have here in Michigan that allows you to name a beneficiary directly on the deed. So you could name all of your children on the deed.
The next one, I turned 65 earlier this year and I'm still working for Michigan Medicine. The benefits office told me that I don't need to sign up for Medicare yet, but at the time I retire, I need to demonstrate that I had credible coverage so that I won't be fined. Is my understanding wrong? No, your understanding is correct. You have 8 months after the date of your retirement to apply for Medicare without having the additional premiums tacked on.
Okay, next question. Are there entities that can help with downsizing, getting rid of stuff? Absolutely. The one I know off the top of my head is in this area is Medigap, but there are more and more companies coming out to help with this. They even help with relocating and setting up your next residence to look like your previous residence. So there are companies that can help. And sometimes you can reach out to Area Agency on Aging, and they might have brochures.
I was denied long-term care insurance due to health care. Is there a change in law that now I can get it? I'm not aware of a change in law. Are you, Amanda?
I am not.
Okay, but there are different programs now. So you can get a life insurance with a policy with a long-term care rider. And sometimes those are easier to qualify for than a traditional long-term care insurance. So you could check with your financial advisor about that.
Next question is the 100 days of Medicare per year or lifetime for subacute rehab? And the answer is neither. So the 100 days that you get for Medicare are, I'd like to just clarify, it's up to 100 days. So sometimes you don't get to maximize that 100 days, but it's per medical event. Jane, do you have anything to add to that?
No, there is a lifetime maximum, but it really takes a catastrophic situation to be able to reach that.
Really, Jane and I spend a lot of our time with Medicare fighting for those 100 days, fighting for our clients to get those 100 days. But it's per event.
Does a long-term care policy pay for independent living within a senior living community? They do not pay for your living expenses. They will sometimes pay for care that you're receiving there, depending on the type of care that you need and the policy terms.
I think it's very important to emphasize here that there are so many different types of riders in long-term care insurance policies that it's really hard to say exactly what it covers because you have to pull that policy out. And sometimes even after reading the policy, you're not sure of what it covers. So, there are people who can assist, with reading your policy. I would consult with, an attorney or the people who you're getting the policy from, because they can often help provide clarification.
And the final one, any advice on reverse mortgages? Yes, be aware, be very aware of what you're doing. There are probably 3 instances in my entire 27-year career that I have felt that a reverse mortgage was beneficial to the person. So don't get hooked into them, get advice before you decide, if you're really strapped for cash and you want to get that money out of your house, talk to a qualified attorney about it before jumping into it, because once you're in, you're in.
So I'm going to jump back in and thank Amanda and Jane, attorneys from Bassett Murray Law Group, for today's. Thank you for everyone's patience, and we're a couple minutes over, but it was well worth it because this information was just phenomenal. I put in the chat that the Bassett Murray Law Group is going to be providing documents about today's presentation. So they'll be coming from our office. You'll be getting them hopefully in the next day or two. So thank you all for being here. We really, really appreciate your participation. One more comment that I want to make. I'm really glad the issue of scams came up because Attorney General Dana Nuss is going to be talking about scams on Thursday at the IPSI Senior Center. I see a lot of names are probably going to be there as well, but we're hoping, crossing our fingers, that we'll be able to have a recording of that as well that we'll be able to share with folks. So anyway, thank you for being here and thank you for joining Senior Living Week.
Thanks for having us, Janet. It was very nice.
Thanks, Amanda and Jane from Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
Can you guys hang out for just
Everybody
one?
have a good day.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.